And good morning, everybody. Peter Christian here. John King over there, the first individual ever to write a sonnet while broadcasting live from the middle of a hurricane.
Wow.
I'm pretending like I'm Brian Williams here.
Well, he didn't give credit to somebody else. That's even in role playing, Peter has a difficult time.
I'm sorry. It's not that I can't lie. It's just that there's too many people listening who know me. Is that you're full of it, mister?
Yeah. So
anyway.
actually, that's actually part of the show this morning.
All right.
There are a lot of people listening and watching what goes on. And back then, when Brian Williams first got in trouble, right? He got in trouble because a bunch of people that were on the helicopter pointed out that never happened.
Oops.
Yeah. Well, there's other cases now. I don't know if you followed this up, but they're digging into a bunch of other stories that Brian Williams has told throughout the years.
Well, yeah, because once the lid's off on that, they'll look at every story he's ever done.
Well, one of the interesting ones that I've noticed is that he had described going down to Hurricane Katrina. This is in his transition. Remember, I think it was it Brokaw that got in trouble for running that story about President Bush's?
No, that was Dan Rather.
Sorry, yeah, you're right. And he ran that story, which was obviously written in modern computer text, and it was supposed to be a Bush, like when he was in college or something, like a National Guard story related. I forget the actual story because it was never an actual story.
Sure.
And anyway, he got canned for this job. Well, Brian Williams was kind of the up and running.
Let's just say he was forced to retire.
Right.
Yeah. All right.
So Brian Williams had this big event. He goes down to Hurricane Katrina, and he describes all these horrible things. Like he gets
a body floating down the street.
He gets dysentery. There's a body flowing down the street. Anyway, now people are like, hey, you know what? No one else was reporting getting dysentery. Even the dogs that drink the water didn't get dysentery. And he described seeing a body floating down the street in the French Quarter, which
was not flooded.
Apparently wasn't underwater.
He may have been floating in something else, but it wasn't the floodwaters.
Right.
Yeah.
But anyway, well, this is probably the best investigative journalism I've seen so far.
All right.
Conan O'Brien has been digging into some of the stories that Brian Williams is reporting on, and here's what he's come up with.
Here we go.
Controversy involving NBC Nightly News anchor Brian Williams because he claimed he was in a helicopter that came under fire in Iraq in 2003. Well, last night, Williams apologized, said he had misspoke. But I don't think this is the only time Brian Williams has tried to get in on someone else's glory. We did some research. Take a look.
But then, 5 years ago today, a plane landed in the Hudson River here in New York City. And Captain Brian Williams was hailed as a hero for his perfect emergency landing. We have witnessed a test of human skill and endurance really unlike any other. Brian Williams completed what's been roundly described as the most difficult free climb in the world. The great American novelist Brian Williams gave us a great American book, To Kill a Mockingbird, and then he disappeared. Charlie Sifford has died. He was often called the Brian Williams of golf. He was the first black player on the PGA Tour.
Okay. Kill a Mockingbird was a great book.
It really was.
Good for Brian Williams.
Yeah, good for Brian Williams.
Okay, so there you go.
There you go. So obviously he's taken himself off. This was the news over the weekend. He's taken himself off the radio waves or the airwaves.
Off the air, just to regroup and regather and and cover his stories
and stop misremembering.
Right. Yes.
Well, this is great because I went back to 2008. And some of our callers last Friday had referenced this. They made jokes about Hillary Clinton.
Right, yeah.
And for some reason, I did not pick up on this story back in the time. I certainly didn't hit my recall button. So I figured maybe you forgot about it too. So I went back to 2008 and I grabbed the video of the news coverage when Hillary Clinton apparently did something very similar to what Brian Williams did. Said they went to a war zone to perform a function as in this case, First Lady, and misremembered. That's actually the same quote that she had.
Wow.
Being under sniper fire.
Now, is she First Lady or Secretary of State?
Now, in this case, she is running against Barack Obama. So it's 2008. She's running against Barack Obama, but she is recalling or misremembering an episode that happened while she was First Lady in 1996.
So she was a senator. at this time.
Right.
New York, senator from New York, a carpetbagger. I mean, a senator from New York. So here we go. Here's Hillary Clinton.
Hillary Clinton has long been touting her experience, but questions are being raised now about whether she's done some embellishing of her record. Here's investigative correspondent Cheryl Atkinson.
It was supposed to be an example of Hillary Clinton's battle-tested experience.
I remember landing under sniper fire.
In the speech last week, Senator Clinton was referring to her visit to Tuzla, Bosnia in 1996 as First Lady. The brutal war was over, but hostilities continued. And though the trip was exactly 12 years ago tomorrow, the memories seemed etched in Clinton's mind.
There was supposed to be some kind of a greeting ceremony at the airport, but instead we just ran with our heads down to get into the vehicles to get to our base.
Problem is, that's not what happened.
Oops.
And we should know, CBS News accompanied the First Lady and daughter Chelsea on that Bosnia trip. That's Senator Clinton talking to me on the military flight into Tuzla. And these are the pictures we recorded of the greeting ceremony when the plane landed. Compare that to Senator Clinton's account.
I remember landing under sniper fire. There was no greeting ceremony, and we basically were told to run to our cars. Now that is what happened.
Thank you. There was no sniper fire either when Senator Clinton visited 2 Army outposts where she posed for photos, and no sniper fire back at the base, where she sang at a USO show starring Sinbad and Sheryl Crow. Referring to the CBS News video, Clinton aides today acknowledged her arrival in Bosnia was not quite as dramatic as Clinton put it.
She meant that there was fire in the hillside around the area when we landed, which was the case.
Who knows if she misremembered, misspoke, exaggerated, whatever, it makes the case for Senator Obama that all this experience that she's been talking about is at least partly her imagination.
Hundreds of thousands have viewed the video online in just the past few days, a reminder that in politics, memory should always match the videotape. Cheryl Atkinson, CBS News.
Oh, by the way, Peter, the video shows this little girl coming up and giving her a gift and hugging her. Like, not under sniper fire. It'd be the opposite. I could go home on the couch and be attacked by my kids. And be like, I am under sniper fire, Peter. I can't come to work. Horrible conditions.
Yes. We're going to take a little break. 721. So I guess the question that you have to ask is that a woman who would do that, does she deserve to be president of the United States?
Exactly. If Brian Williams is to be canned over lying about being shot at in Iraq, should Hillary Clinton not be considered for the presidency because she lied about what happened in Bosnia?
Now we're going to be, well, of course, there are people that have said she lied about a lot of things. So anyway, we're going to come right back. Love to know what you think. We'll keep the lines open, 721-1290 or 1-800-568-5309. We'll be right back. Or does she get a pass? Because after all, she is Hillary Clinton. We'll be right back. We're back on Talkback. 721-1290 is our number. That's John King over there. I'm Peter Christian. Yes,
I didn't have the clip here, but I did find a clip of Hillary Clinton giving her own excuse for why she made the claim about Bosnia. And after coughing awkwardly about a question during a press interview, she then came back and said something, I'm tired of answering this question. But and then she said, look, and I'll give her credit for this. She came flat out and said it was wrong. And she said that the reason she said that was because she was tired and didn't have enough sleep and didn't know why she said it, and that if you really wanted to get the truth, you can go and read her book. Now, this is a book. This is her autobiography, and I was really upset when I saw the title of the autobiography because it was the planned title for Peter Christian's autobiography, which is Living History. And which was a crushing moment for...
Just because I'm old. Every time I take a step, it's historic because people never expected me to live this long. What do you think?
I was a little afraid when I got to work here, Peter wouldn't be here because there was so much rain. After this, the deluge. So, thought Methuselah might have kicked the bucket or something.
That would be Noah.
No, Methuselah kicked the bucket.
Well, he was 869 years old. Something like that. All right, let's get to the phone. Enough of this old stuff. Nick, thanks for holding. You're on Talkback. Hi.
Hi, morning, John and Peter.
Morning.
So here's the deal with what I've seen with the Brian Williams situation. He came out with the story that his helicopter was shot down while he was visiting Iraq. In reality, the pilot of his helicopter said that they were not shot down, that it had been another Shink helicopter in the formation, but they were in fact shot at, which did match up with a portion of Brian Williams' story. So it wasn't that he embellished the entire story, it was that he embellished part of it.
All right.
On top of that, he willingly stepped back from his anchoring position on NBC. He'll let the investigation play its course for however long that takes, and he'll most likely continue with his job completely intact.
Okay.
Well, are you sure he willingly? Now that's the way they're covering it. But if Peter were to say something that was a lie, and then in 2 weeks you found out that Peter has voluntarily retired, do you assume that there is no background discussion there?
Well,
I think that
conversations with reporters, with the executives of NBC, and with statements Brian Williams himself was made. And on top of that, it seems reasonable for him to have taken that step back himself because, there's the story with Katrina. I didn't hear anything about him saying he had dysentery, but I do know as a fact that they've released pictures from Mr. Gunn to Katrina. Part of the French Quarter, at least the hotel they were staying at, was flooded, so there was the possibility of the body floating by being true. So at this point, there's only one case's embellishment, and even so, that's only partly true. So
now you realize that back when he was making the case about the helicopter, he said that like a rocket-propelled grenade pierced the skin of the helicopter, but kept on and amazingly didn't explode, and that the pilot of the helicopter was wounded and got a Purple Heart. I mean, there's a lot.
Was another helicopter in the formation.
There's a lot of embellishment here that he claimed was in his own helicopter that obviously was not. It's difficult to misremember so much about a single incident, wouldn't you think?
Well, and it's with that part of the story was true. The fact that they were under small fire from handheld arms. I will say that is kind of a suspect to say that you misremember your helicopter being shot by a rocket-propelled grenade. But if it's found to be that is the only story in the decade he's been doing news reporting that he's embellished so far, he still has a pretty good track record.
But keep this in mind. This is a story that he repeated. It's not like he just did it once. In fact, the reason why he got caught is he just did it again a couple weeks ago on Letterman. And he was planned. He had a planned interview with Letterman this Thursday that he canceled after all this came through. So, yeah, it's just one story, but it's a pretty big one for a journalist. Not very many journalists get shot at and have to go down in a war zone, right? I mean,
which he did get shot at. It's just he didn't get hit with a rocket.
So I haven't heard the pilot saying that they were shot at with Brian Williams on the plane.
If I were at home, I'd tell you who wrote the article. I read it just 2 or 3 days ago.
Okay. Well, we sure appreciate the update. Thanks for clarifying that for us.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Have a great day.
Yeah, thanks for your call, Nick.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not like we're clapping in glee that something bad happened to Brian Williams.
Well, no, I will say this. I am clapping in glee that it was found out that he lied. I mean, even and I am also happy that Brian Williams has supporters out there.
Sure. So. Yeah, absolutely. I wish that I had people that were, if you could grab line one, actually line 1 and 3, they're all ringing. I've got line 2. G, we're going to ask you to hold on for a second. We'll be right back after this quick time out and get you all on. It's 8:21. Thanks for joining us here on the Monday edition of Talk Back. I'm Peter Christian. John King also joining me, and all 3 lines are humming. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think a lot of people might have a difficult time understanding why this is an issue, right?
Right.
I like Brian Williams. He's just a talky guy. I like Hillary Clinton. She's been around for a while, and I think she should be president, But just imagine if someone that you didn't agree with was in the same situation.
Right.
Imagine that President Bush, for example, had taken credit for being on a helicopter that was shot down and the rigors and the torment of that emotion, and then finding out later that it was all somebody else's story. You wouldn't give the guy 2 yards to run on that.
A little bit of fairness here. Let's get G on the line. G, good morning. How are you, sir?
Good morning, gentlemen.
What's up?
My difficulty that I have is that a journalist wears the moniker as a reporter of the facts as they see them under real situations. the public the public wants to know the facts, not opinions, not embellishments, and I think journalism has lost the truth factor, that we are not quite sure whether it is true or it's not true, because the journalist has basically lost his integrity.
Well, here's what's happened, and as someone who's been in broadcast journalism for quite a while now, the one thing that you have to maintain is your professional credibility and believability.
Exactly.
And when you lose that, as when it's even slightly tarnished, okay, which is what's happened to Brian Williams, especially in such a highly visible, he is the face of NBC News, okay? Yes. And so now that this has happened, he had to step back in order to find some way either to let it all blow over and let time heal all wounds, or find a way to heal or repair or do something to rebuild, the credibility that he used to have. And I'm not even sure if it's even possible.
And that is the problem that we have with the different news sources, is that we have the ones on the left, and we have the assumed ones on the left and the ones on the right, where they should be nonpartisan, just down the middle.
Well, it's an old joke that in journalism school, it used to be that they were the watchdogs of democracy, but they have now become the attack dogs of democracy.
Exactly.
And so it's unfortunate. I'm not sure exactly how that whole transition. A lot of it started during Watergate.
Yes. And I think a lot of it is it's marketing deal now, right?
Oh yeah.
Back in the day, like when maybe one paper had control. Actually, the Muslims,
thanks for the call.
They didn't have the competition that you have today.
Right. Yeah.
And then when you invite competition into an issue like the media, right, you're going to have people trying to play up and dramatize as much as they possibly can, because that's how they're going to get their piece sold, their piece marketed.
Not only that, but in today's internet line too. In today's never mind, it's gone. In today's world of internet, and as a matter of fact, I was just discussing this with an attorney friend of mine. In today's world where everything is absolutely instantaneous, from getting the story and getting it online, whoever gets it up online first, either through Twitter or Facebook or the regular website, because these news stories, and I don't mean to burst your bubble here, but these news stories are monetized. Well, in that the more clicks you get on your story, the more you can go to your advertisers and say, look at that, we got the story first, we got 10,000 clicks, 10,000 leads or views or whatever you call it, and so we can make more money from that. And so there is this immense pressure not only to be accurate, but also to be first and be accurate, and it's really a difficult road to walk. So anyway, let's get Mike on the line. Mike, thanks for holding your own talk back. Go ahead.
Well, I just, according to what is all over the radio stations now, but that guy that was flying the helicopter supposedly took small arms fire when Brian Williams was on there. He ain't even a helicopter pilot. He just stepped up and said he was flying one. Now he's disappeared. Nobody can find him.
Okay.
So anyway, I don't know what being upset with a guy that I wouldn't trust no further than so anyway, but what the president did with the secret meeting and what he did on that prayer breakfast, I want to hear some of these local preachers call your radio station or at least write a letter and say they were offended or really ticked off. I thought somebody ought to slap that boy for saying, hey, remember the Crusades? Remember the Jim Crow? I have nothing to do with it, and that was a damned insult to everybody in this country.
Not only that, Mike, but I was the only one that was actually alive during the Crusades.
Yeah, there you go. I said, well, I might have been.
Now, Mike might be old enough to have hung out with Peter during the Crusades.
But I beat you to it. I'm on guard now for the rampaging Christians who will come by and burn me at the stake.
Yeah.
This is no excuse for a president of this country to talk that way, or even and then invite people secret to the White House who are, some of them are unindicted conspirators in the 9/11 deal. So this is what don't worry about Brian Williams. When you see a body floating by on bare pavement, he's smoking something.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Bye.
Appreciate the call. Go ahead.
I think that whole thing about the Jim Crow, we didn't really cover that aspect of it, but, the abolitionist movement started in the Christian church.
I know it. Well, William
Amazing
Wilberforce,
Grace. Right? I mean, you should watch that movie, Amazing Grace, which is about the story of William Wilberforce.
Yeah, it's a great story.
And Jim Crow did not come out of the church. I mean, I just don't get the correlation here.
I think what he said, it was reinforced by some members of the clergy at some point.
Oh, I'm sure there's some idiot out there that did that. But
anyway,
in retrospect too, the other thing that really I was thinking a lot about, I was thinking about getting in trouble in high school for a fight, and being like, he punched me first, and then the other guy saying, well, yeah, but back when we were in kindergarten, he stole my eraser. I mean, the correlation, the time difference is significant, I think.
I know. I understand. All right, so line 1 is no longer ringing. Matt, you're on Talkback. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I don't know where to begin, but I heard Brian Williams was at the Battle of Thermopylae with Leonidas.
No, that was me.
He was the 301st soldier.
You looked like in those days. You had the hair and stuff. But anyhow,
and I had a six-pack. So,
let's
put it this way. I actually was in New Orleans after Katrina. After Katrina.
All right.
I was down there with a company. We did mobile catering for the fire service, and our contract was picked up by FEMA. We were just up and around the river bend from where Brian Williams was staying at the Ritz-Carlton. If you look at a map of New Orleans, you can see a bridge going across the Mississippi River east to west. That's a Hugh P. Long Bridge.
Okay.
And we were just upstream a little bit from there, maybe a quarter mile from the Hugh P. Long Bridge. Now, that part of the city didn't flood. In fact, the French Quarter, only the very, 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 very southern tip of the French Quarter flooded about 5 inches in the streets. Now, if you can float a dead body in 5 inches of water, you're some kind of special man. There was a line of destruction. Don't get me wrong. This is like something out of World War II newsreels. There were buildings that had stood for hundreds and hundreds of years. The brick buildings that had collapsed. There was rotting food from the restaurants who didn't have any power.
There was refrigerators full of cash.
Now, if there's only 5 inches, do you think it would have been...
That's far up towards what's the university there? But anyhow, yeah, that was the governor, and his freezer was still running.
Hey, listen, Matt, we're up against the break real quick. Give you 30 seconds to wrap up.
The bottom line is Brian, can you imagine Walter Cronkite coming out and saying something like that, and then people just saying, I misspoke.
Gotcha.
No, you lied.
All right.
And you have no credibility when you stand out as a liar.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate the call. That's Walter Cronkite, CBS News. Good night.
And there's another story, by the way, with Williams.
That's the way it is. Yes, I'm sorry.
Also involves a helicopter.
Oh, you're kidding.
And I'll bring it up after the break.
Okay, Jerry and Patrick, we're going to get you guys on in a minute. Plus, we have a guest coming in, right, with Bob Seidenschwartz?
That's right, 9 o'clock.
Okay, 9 o'clock. Excellent. We'll be right back. Hey, thanks for joining us on this Monday edition of Talkback. We're kind of hitting the old Brian Williams thing and credibility. And
I teased this, so I should bring it up real quick.
Go ahead.
Okay, so he's coming under fire. Get it?
Yeah.
For talking about an instance where he was in a helicopter. This time in Israel. This is a quote from this story covered by NBC. In a blog post written for NBCNews.com dated July 18, 2006, Williams said that he was flying at 1,500 feet in a Black Hawk helicopter with a high-ranking Israeli general while rockets were being launched by the terror group into northern Israel from southern Lebanon. In the blog, Williams says the helicopter pilot tells him the rockets, quote, landed about 30 seconds ago, end quote. At that point, Williams says he witnessed a rocket launch about 6 miles away. A rising trail of smoke, this is Williams recalling, then a second rocket launch, an orange flash, and more smoke as a rocket heads off towards Israel. However, A month later, Williams made an appearance on Comedy Central's The Daily Show and told host Jon Stewart about a view of rockets I had never seen passing underneath us, 1,500 feet beneath us. There is no such description of the rockets passing underneath the helicopter in Williams' original blog post. The anchor continued, and we've got the gunner doors open on this thing, and I'm saying to the general, some 4-star, quote, it wouldn't take much for them to just adjust the aim to try to do a ring toss right through the open doors, would it? End quote. So anyway, kind of embellishing the story. Instead of the rockets appearing 6 miles away, they're now going right underneath this helicopter, maybe because of his appearance on The Daily Show.
The rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air. All right, let's gave truth to the night.
Ooh.
But our flag, well, I'm sorry. Jerry, good morning. You're on Talkback. Hi.
Good morning. Taking you back a little bit, do you remember when Bush was running and Dan Rathers made up the story about his National Guard record, and they proved that he just flat out lied?
That's correct, yes, and forced him to retire.
And, well, first they gave him an award, didn't they?
Well, they tried to give him an award, but I'm not sure it worked out.
Well, my two points is, what would happen if this was a Rush Limbaugh or Sean Hannity that made up this story, or a Republican? What do you think they would do?
I think it would be a lot bigger headline than it is now.
Well, if I don't misremember, this actually did happen. This actually did happen to, what's that libertarian guy? He said he was in Iraq and that he was part of a convoy, and apparently he wasn't doing his live reports from the convoy. He was doing them from like outside of his hotel room or something. And anyway, he got canned and had to go to a different network.
Yeah. Well, I guess my question is for both of you, and your opinion on why do you think, and it's not just NBC, it's ABC, CBS, and why do you guys think that the press is so liberal? I'd like to get both of your opinions on that.
Well, I think it's been trending liberal for many, many years. The fact that journalists, and I'm the last person that should say this because I don't have any formal journalistic training. I never went to journalism school, but I know a lot of reporters, okay? And it just seemed like the focus changed somewhere in the 70s and 80s from where being a reporter meant, I'm going to go get the story because it's a great story and I want to find out the truth and give it to people, okay? That's the whole journalistic ethic, all right? It went from being that to I want to change the world. The way to change the world is to do it through journalism. And so if I can write my story in such a way that it will change the way people think about things or change the way they feel or change the way they act, then I will have done my job as a journalist.
But I think if we're honest, there's conservative idealists that have that same want to change the world motivation, right?
Yeah.
Here's the stupid but simple John explanation for the liberal, the liberal media.
All right.
Almost all of the major national news media is based out of giant cities: New York, San Francisco, California, or other areas that have deep blue traditions.
You say they're deep blue, yeah.
And honestly, you grow up around it. It comes from a part of your daily life, and you're choosing between this Democrat or that Democrat. Like you come to have a kind of slanted view of the world. The same would be true if we had a media that was based out of Texas, right? If national media was based out of Texas. And we heard all day how Ted Cruz was so heroic and how bad whatever this other state's character was, right? Then we'd probably have a little bit of a different view. And if the reporters are covering this all the time, they would have a different view as well. But for most of these people, life in rural America or the Midwest or the conservative areas of the country is almost unknown to them.
Yeah. And really quite unnecessary, I hate to say. Hey, well, thanks for the call. We answered that best we could. We're up against a break. Craig and Harry, we appreciate your being patient. We're going to get you guys on right after this quick timeout. Hey, this is Talkback, and it's Monday. John King's over there. I'm Peter Christian, and we've got all three lines full this morning. I managed to strike a nerve here, I guess, talking about Brian Williams and Hillary Clinton misremembering things, and we're talking about the ethics of journalism and the ethics of politics. Wait, that would be an oxymoron, right? An oxymoronic to say
ethics of politics? Yeah.
Anyway,
I think there's
so let's get Craig on the line. Craig, good morning. You're on Talkback. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning, gentlemen. Well, it is a shame, but it's just the man's a big fat liar. He's a phony. He's telling war stories, and he's suffering from self-importance. And Peter, you said you weren't cheering about this or anything, but I'm going to tell you, I'm dancing like Snoopy on peanuts.
Okay.
Doggone lefties anyways. All right. Hey, thank you, gentlemen.
All right. You have a good day.
Wow. Okay, there you go. All right, let's get Harry on the line. Harry, good morning. Are you dancing like Snoopy on peanuts this morning?
I could really care less. I mean, I always find the best liars, our best storytellers are liars. I mean,
all right.
They always embellish it. But what I want to talk about is what John said earlier about abolitionists, and it did start with Christians, but the other side were Christians too. The people who were fighting for slavery were Christians, and they have a better case in the Bible for keeping slaves than the people who say you're not supposed to. I mean, you look in Leviticus 44, right there, it says you can have slaves. I mean, and you hold that's not just.
Oh, sure. There's actually even slavery in the New Testament as well. Philemon was a slave.
Yes.
But even when there's slavery, you should read the book, and it'll tell you how you're supposed to treat a slave. And it's very different.
I mean, you can own slaves. I mean, I don't care if you own a slave. If you always should treat them right, sure. But just the fact that you can own a slave, that's not a proper thing. It's like saying, well, if you kill somebody, just do it so they don't hurt so bad. I mean,
No, Harry. There's a significant difference between slavery in the world at that time and slavery as we came to know it in the United States.
You may buy them, and they will be yours forever. That's pretty much, and their children shall be yours. I mean, that's slavery. That's the thing that really did away with slavery was technology.
Real quick. Does God command slavery?
Yeah, it says
no. He doesn't.
Leviticus 25:44. As for the males and female slaves whom you may have, you may buy male and female slaves from among the nations that are around you. You may also buy from among the strangers who sojourn with you and their families that are with you.
But may is not command.
Well,
may is allow.
I mean,
And Harry, you also have to remember there's a difference between a slave and a bondservant.
But the bondservant isn't somebody who their children are yours too. This says their children shall be yours forever. I mean, I know you try to make justifications for it.
No, I'm not justifying slavery.
Well, you're saying that why the Bible really doesn't say that, but it does. It says you can have slaves, and they shall be yours, and their children shall be yours, and they shall be in your inheritance forever. I mean, that's slave. I mean, so the idea that Christianity did away with slavery.
So are you saying that we should all be endorsing slavery now?
Well, if you believe that the Bible is the Word of God, well, then you should, shouldn't you? I mean, that's if this is God's Word, shouldn't we be following God's Word? I mean, it's man's law against God's law. So God's law overrides man's law. So I mean,
well, you have to realize if you're a Christian, we were speaking, and he was speaking too. I'm speaking here of President Obama, the Christian mandate, right? You realize that there's a second, there's a New Testament, right?
Right, but so you're saying morals are relative, right? Since it was okay then, it's not okay now, so that means it's relative. So
no, I'm not saying it's relative. I'm saying there's a New Testament, a new commandment.
Yeah, Christians don't. Testament was good,
hold on. Listen to me. There's a whole bunch of stuff in Levitical law that Christians do not abide by. We wear clothing of two different materials. We do not cook our meals for the Sabbath in a separate kitchen. We have a lot of different mandates that are very, very different, and that's because we don't abide by Levitical law at all. But we abide by a separate rule.
Morals. I mean, so morals. I mean, the idea of wearing different clothes—that's not a real moralistic thing.
No, actually, there are three different types of laws. There are laws, civil laws. There are what we call cultic laws dealing with the church structure, and there are moral laws as well.
Right.
You can break a civil law and still make the moral decision. For example, you could lie to Nazis coming into your house. You'd be breaking a civil law. You're not supposed to lie to authorities, but you'd be upholding the moral law of preserving life.
Okay, yes, so like saying moral laws don't change. Well, owning a slave is immoral, as far as I can see. I think that's what in modern day society that's considered immoral. But in that days, it was okay. I mean,
polygamy was also okay, right? Many of these guys had multiple wives.
Yeah.
Yeah, Solomon, take a number for better service. Hey, listen. Harry, we could argue about this all day, but we have all three of our lines humming. So
but I'm just pointing out.
I know, and I appreciate your comment, and I appreciate your point. All right, so let's move on.
This is my commandment that you love one another.
That's
Love
your
your
joy
neighbor
may
as
be
yourself.
full. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, Catherine, you're on Talkback. Hi.
Okay, well, I'm getting real tired of hearing people kick the United States in the teeth about slavery.
Go for it.
Muslim slave traders were the middlemen between the buyers and sellers back then. In fact, they were the ones that bought from the tribes who were fighting each other and then enslaving each other and then selling them to the Muslim slave traders who then brought them over to the United States or to the New World, in which approximately 5% of the slaves were sold in North America and 95% were sold down in the Brazil area. Okay? Number two, Christian abolitionists were the prime movers against slavery in this country, and they were the ones that organized and pushed and prodded and pulled to have laws put in place to abolish slavery. Three, the U.S. was the only country or the only nation in the entire history of the world that I am aware of who fought a bloody civil war where over 600,000 people died. One of the reasons for that war was to get rid of slavery. So, by God, why don't we stop kicking the United States in the teeth about it? Because that's 160 years ago. And slavery still exists in this world today. And it is practiced by the Islamic nations. The Mauritania, for example, 1/3 of its population are chattel slaves. They are bought, they are bred, they are sold, and then they are from birth to death slaves. Born into slavery, die in slavery. Their children are born into slavery and die into slavery. That's 1/3 of the population. Okay? I'm sorry, I don't mean to get wound up about it.
That's all right. Well, okay, thanks for the call.
Okay,
Appreciate
bye.
it. All right, Bob, you're on Talkback. Go ahead. Hello, Bob? Yes, Bob.
You're on, Bob.
Go ahead, sir.
The reason the crusade started was because a new religious group called the Muslims attacked Jerusalem and started taking away the country from the Israelites, or whoever was in there at that time. They went in and attacked the Holy Land. The Crusaders went to defend the Holy Land. So it seems to be the same thing that's going on now. The Muslims are attacking all the countries, and the Americans are coming in to defend them again.
All right, Bob, thanks for the call.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate it. We're up against it. Wow, this conversation has taken an interesting turn. Anyway, so we're going to come right back, 721-1290. All three lines are open right now. If you've been trying to get through and couldn't because they were all full, they're ringing right now. 721-1290 is our number. We're coming right back. Welcome back to Talkback. 721-1290 is our number. Had a very interesting hour so far. We've kind of gone hither and yon. What? Yes.
You know, we were talking about journalism and journalistic integrity. And I think it's important that we don't make the past a golden era, right?
Okay.
And, if you remember yellow journalism and William Randolph Hearst, and even before that, half of the story we know about what happened in ancient wars is probably overinflated, and we only have one side, and that would be the side of the victors.
Yeah, the guys who won.
The people that write the stories were not always telling the truth. Humans are prone to make mistakes, and sometimes intentionally so, to inflate their own egos, right? So one of the things that I think is important in a society that we have today, and that is a show like Talkback. Because if someone tells something that's wrong or says a lie, you can call their bluff on air. And I think that's a huge, important element of modern technology.
All right, let's get back to the phones and say we have exactly 2 minutes. Misty, go. You're on Talkback. Quickly.
You know, you just read my mind. That's exactly what I was going to say. I love Brian Williams. I think he's a cool cat. But he's got an ego just like every man, I think, in this world.
Just
and
like
that's
me.
something that a lot of guys I know hold very dear to them. And when they start telling fish tales, sometimes it can get a little overinflated. And, I don't really hold that against the guy. I think for all of his journalistic attributes, he's a really good reporter. And I don't think this one thing should be taken so heavily.
What are his journalistic attributes? If he was as ugly as sin and didn't have a sonorous voice, would you say he had journalistic attributes? What is the attribute that you want in a journalist other than being able to tell the truth?
Well, I think he's pretty professional. I've for the most part, anything I've heard him report on is checked out. So,
Well, not this, and at least two
and
other
as far
stories
as-
we've talked about.
Just one more thing. As far as slaves go,
Yeah.
I have a slave. He came willingly, and his children will be mine forever.
Happy Valentine's Day.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Valentine's Day, you guys.
Thanks for the call. Tyler, we
My
got
wife
about,
has
got
one,
about a
too.
minute. Go ahead.
Hi, guys. Don't forget that he rescued a puppy from a burning building.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Don't forget about that one. So what I wanted to talk about was the part of the president's speech that nobody is talking about, and that was the end of it. And I never heard it until I heard the whole speech last week on your guys' show. And the part that I'm talking about is the part where President Obama talks about switching religions. If you guys could find that clip and play it, it would be awesome because it would contribute to this conversation a lot.
About switching religion, you say?
Well, he grew up in Indonesia.
Oh,
he
that's
went
right.
to Muslim schools as a kid. So,
Well, at the end of the speech, if you listen to it, I mean, we have a Christian president talking at the National Prayer Breakfast, slamming Christianity for something that happened 1,000 years ago, and then he closes the speech at the end by talking about people's rights to switch religions.
yeah.
So-
Don't you think we do have that right?
And we
No,
are.
I do, but I think it's ironic coming from a Christian president at the Christian prayer breakfast, bashing Christianity.
Tyler, I'm so sorry. We're like,
It's okay.
I gotta hit this hard break. Lucille, I'm so sorry we couldn't get you on. We have a special guest coming up at 9 o'clock this morning, and we'll talk about the the documentary film festival coming up. Want to open that up for me, Bob? Sure. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It's hour number 2 of Talkback, and I'm Peter Christian along with John King. Bob Seidenschwartz joining us here in studio today. And, yeah, go ahead. Push the buttons.
Watching these guys play with the cell phone is just fabulous.
You like that?
You should. Everybody should have this opportunity.
Okay, I got it. All right, I got it.
It's like watching a cat do the Rubik's Cube.
Are you making fun of me because of my advanced age, John? Just because this is not my phone. I know how to use my phone. This is Bob's phone.
In Peter's defense, I couldn't get it to open up
I should
either.
just make you read this. Okay, John Michael Shink is in our studio, and he's totally impressed with our show so far. You can tell. He's going,
Top
who
notch.
the hell are these people? What am I doing here? Get my agent on the phone. No, I'm just kidding. John Michael Shink is co-producer and co-director of a documentary entitled We Are the Ones. And it says, when tribal feuds ignite a firestorm of violence, 3 surgeons unite for peace. Francis grew up with little schooling during the Sudanese Civil War. Ajak is a lost boy who has returned to the tribe. He fled as a child. Both men are protégés of Glenn, a grizzled but brilliant American surgeon. So that's kind of the byline.
Yeah, it's a good synopsis. Yeah.
So, yeah. So first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you guys for having me. Really appreciate it. Like I said, it's great to talk about the film, and it's been a fantastic visit here in Missoula.
Tell us a little bit about you first. A little about John Michael Shink. Where are you from, and how did you get into documentary film making in the first place?
Absolutely. Well, I'm originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I sort of backed into documentary filmmaking. I went to school at a small school at Allegheny College up by sort of in the snow belt by Erie, PA.
Lots of snow now.
Lots of snow, yeah. So I spent some time there, and obviously, and I thought I would be in marketing or political science. Stumbled into filmmaking, really took to it, loved it, and kept going ever since. And it's sort of ironic now that I'm in D.C. and I'm not in politics whatsoever, but it's a nice place to be to tell real stories about real people. And so ever since sort of started my professional career in D.C., I work for Pendragon Productions. Myself and my good friend Michael Skinner sort of run Pendragon. We're based right in southeast Washington, D.C. And so it's a great location if you want to tell interesting real stories.
So how did you pick this story on Sudan? Did you just like throw a dart at the map and like, let's go there because it looks safe? Or what?
Yeah. Well, you know, it's kind of obviously it's a sort of a strange story. So Michael, who I had mentioned, his wife was getting her doctorate from George Washington University in D.C. At the same time, Glenn Galehood was receiving his like 8th advanced degree. I mean, epidemiology, tropical medicine, all of these things. And so basically, Michael thought, you know, why in the world do you need so many degrees? And he started to tell him about his experience traveling overseas, doing these medical mission trips for 40 years. We like to call him sort of, he's like the Dos Equis most interesting man in the world kind of guy, because he's 70 years old, gray beard, gray hair. He runs marathons. He's a master hunter.
So you hung out with him because of all the ladies that were
Yeah,
attracted
he
to him.
just flocked to him,
Basically.
really. And
Okay.
and you get to go to his house and just have like moose heads and elks and stuffed bear and wolverines all around you at all times.
Stuffed bear, this is to eat, like a turducken?
Well, you know what? It's funny enough. He did basically everything that's stuffed in his house. He has a version of it in his basement to eat in the freezer. So no, he's the real deal. But so we got to know him and thought that he was a really interesting guy, but didn't know that there was a full story there. But he started to tell us about the guys that he works with every day when he's overseas, specifically in Sudan, the sort of indigenous healthcare workers that he's worked with time and time again. And so he started telling us about Ajak. He started telling us about Francis. And given their different backgrounds and their sort of limited level of experience, but the incredible things that they're able to do, we thought that there was a story there. And so we sort of took a flyer. And then 5 months later, he had 3 seats available on his next chartered flight into Sudan. And it was myself, Michael, and our sound guy, Glenn Pygary, who had done work in Uganda and other remote places. So he was familiar with it. And so we took the 3 seats and went for it.
Now, what type of group is he going with, or is he just freelancing all this?
He's a freelancer. He doesn't like to be sort of restricted or restrained by rules or any other type of group. He's an interesting guy. He has been doing these medical mission trips for, like I said, about 40 years, and he's gone all over the world. And he's gone to Sudan and South Sudan a number of times. But yeah, he's not really affiliated with anybody. He sort of jumps around, and he'll sort of partner up with different NGOs. To either sort of help bring in, like when we went over, we brought duffel bag after duffel bag of medical resources, syringes, things like that, different medications. And so when he does, he usually partners up with somebody, brings some equipment over, and then teaches, and then leaves. But it's sort of random, and he sort of works with a number of different organizations.
Well, all Americans know that Sudan is near Australia.
Yes.
But I want to know what were you
Yes.
surprised to find out when you went over there?
You know what? It was a fascinating experience, sort of
That's
a life
not true,
changer.
by the way.
Yes. For all the listeners, that's actually not geographically correct. But when we went over, it was a fascinating experience, as one might think. But the big thing that I took away from it, and I guess it might sound cliche, but people are people. I mean, tremendously different circumstances that they live in South Sudan compared to what we're used to in the Western world. Tremendously different circumstances, but they all want the same thing. They want, to be healthy. They want to be able to provide for their families. They want to have some level of sort of wealth, at least that they can feel comfortable. The issues obviously stem from the fact that there is no system in place to allow for any of that to happen. And so it becomes survival of the fittest. It becomes a scenario where you prioritize things that in the West we would find to be strange. There's a good little story about a doctor that we had spent time with, not in the film, but had spent time in Sudan. I was talking to him, and he said that, early on in his career, he took mosquito nets to South Sudan with the idea, sort of, not to fully educate everybody about sort of malaria and everything, because that was a different program, but basically said, put this net over anything that you think is of really high importance to you. Put this over what you really care about. And so, of course, they thought that the kids would be protected and be safe. But in reality, they put the mosquito net over the cows, over the cattle, and they let the kids run around. And the reason is, and it sounds crazy when we think about it, but the reason is because a woman can have another child. She can't birth a cow. And that sounds like a really sort of rough way of thinking about it. But if you consider that at the end of the day, these individuals are going to move into sort of old age at some point. They're going to need somebody to take care of them. They can have more kids. They can't have more cattle, and cattle is really sort of a source of currency and wealth. And so...
Yep. We're up against a break, and we're going to do that about every 10 minutes or so. This is fascinating. We're just getting started. What's that?
Oh, I just made a cow sound.
It's okay. We'll be right back with more of Talk Back. I work with this guy every day. We're going to come right back with more in a moment. Talk Back rolls right along on this Monday, best day of the week. I know John's throwing things at me all over already. 721-1290 is our number, 1-800-568-5309. Bob Seidenschwartz with us. John Michael Shink is a co-producer, co-director for the documentary film festival that's going on in Missoula. His film premiered yesterday, We Are the Ones, and we actually had one of the Lost Boys on Talkback as part of the Montana World Affairs Council, Bob.
Yeah, John Michael, are you familiar with John Dow?
I am, yes.
All right, so John was on the radio here, and then he visited Missoula. And part of that was several surgeons here in Missoula brought him to Montana, obviously to talk about what's going on with his foundation and the Sudan. So let's go back a little bit and explain to the audience what's happening in the Sudan, that this story is even such to be told right now. And what did you find? And for you personally, when you were there in 2010, did you feel at risk?
Sure, those are great questions. It's important to note, when we decided when Michael and I decided to make this film, we would not consider ourselves sort of expert on the region really at all. What we went into, we thought, rather than tell sort of the 5,000-foot view sort of dissertation on South Sudan, why not we sort of go in and try to tell the most sort of intimate, real story that we can, a relatable story where audience members hopefully can watch these surgeons, these individuals, get to know them as people, understand the circumstances that they're in, relate to those circumstances, and hopefully, if they buy into the characters, understand the situation, they can then sort of understand the larger issues at play.
Now, in a typical Hollywood film where they're telling a story, okay, you're not telling a story. You're actually living with people and letting them tell their story, right?
That's absolutely right. No, for sure. And so, but you take a lot there, I read somewhere that, putting together a documentary is like putting together a puzzle where you don't know what the end result's supposed to look like. And so there are a lot of unanswered questions from the very get-go. But Bob, to your point, we went into South Sudan trying to tell a very real, personal story. And what we discovered is that certainly knew a general background of Sudan, civil wars, multiple civil wars, chaos and instability for years and years and years, and understood about the Lost Boys and their history. What we discovered when we were there, and it was right at the time where the North or the South seceded from the North, and so what you found was that there were all sorts of tribes, and we never went to the North. We stayed in the South, but there were so many tribes that just sort of claimed different territory, and we look at North Sudan and South Sudan from a Westerner's perspective as this sort of the separation of Sudan. But in reality, in my experience, South Sudan is really separated and divided into so many different sort of territories, and they're all tribal territories. And those tribes, in my experience, identify with their tribe before they identify with any sort of nationality. And so because of that, because of the lack of resources, because the lack of healthcare, food, water, all of these things, infrastructure in general, there was no government. There was technically a government of South Sudan, but it really didn't exist. I mean, there were troops that would disarm. It would exist in bad ways, like for instance, negative ways. There would be troops would disarm certain villages, and they wouldn't disarm others, and so that just put I'm
sure these troops were aligned with the tribes that they weren't disarming. When John was here, there was a very fascinating story that he told, and I think there's parallels here. The eye surgeries that they were doing would bring in other tribal people to have these surgeries done, and there was great mistrust. So one of the stories inside your story is the surgeons were there for humanitarian purposes, but there was also another part of the story that I'd like you to tell in terms of what this was actually doing to build potentially relationships and trust amongst the different tribes as these surgeons were performing their tasks.
That's an excellent point. There was one of the things that Glenn says in the film is that there is a general mistrust, as you talked about, Bob, between the different tribes. And so when somebody is laying on a table and they're about to have an operation performed on them, and it's being performed by a white Westerner, there's this sense of safety because you're not affiliated, you're not a part of this conflict. You're coming over to provide some level of service to me, and I trust that you have the ability, knowledge, and education to do it. If there is an African person standing over them, then that's a whole different story. And so there's a scene in the film where a gentleman is laying and he's having a hernia surgery, and so his abdomen is open. He's laying on the table, and they're performing the surgery. Their hands are in his stomach, and he is on ketamine, and he starts to wake up sort of halfway through. And he, the way Glenn tells it and the way that it's portrayed in the film is that, you look up and you see this African doctor, a jock, performing the surgery. And all of a sudden you revert back to the sort of primitive instincts of, this guy's going to rustle my cattle, he's going to steal my niece, I have to get out of here. And so he wakes up and he starts thrashing around and swinging, and we're holding him down, the staff is holding him down, people are running in from the other room. We're still filming, so there's like, my hand is in the movie because my hand's holding his leg down, but my other hand is holding the camera. So so those types of things happen. And so when we were there, we followed these gentlemen. Again, we went in with the idea that we were going to tell a medical story, but in reality, the story became sort of much deeper than that, and there was a whole nother layer that came about. Wow.
If you have any questions or comments, give us a call. We'd love to hear from you. 721-1290 is our number. John Michael Shink joining us, co-producer, co-director of We Are the Ones from the documentary festival, film festival going on in Missoula. And we'll be right back in just a moment. This is Talk Back, and it's Monday, and it's a very special show. We're talking with John Michael Shink. He's co-producer, co-director of We Are the Ones from the documentary film festival. What's going on in Missoula? Go ahead, John.
I have to ask, why the title We Are the Ones?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So it came actually from one of the doctors when we were speaking to a jock, one of the three main characters in the film. He talked about sort of, there is this sense in South Sudan where the change is going to come from the outside. If you need a well dug, it's going to come from the outside. If you need training from, in the medical field, that's going to come from the outside. And what a jock said is that essentially,
John Michael, what is it? You keep saying jock.
A jock is the name of the guy.
A jock. I apologize.
See, Peter's Bob's over here. Yeah, I play. I play. I'm a jock. I got my outfit and my shoes on.
So a jock.
Okay.
Yeah, it's funny. For about the first week, I called him a jack, and it turned, his name is a jock. But what he basically said was, you can't rely on the politicians. We are the ones that are going to solve these problems. We are the ones that are going to change South Sudan. And so it really became sort of a call to the South Sudanese to sort of set these tribal divides aside for a moment and really embrace their. If not me, then who? Exactly.
So that raises an interesting question for me. You have, I think John said, literally 100 and something different languages in the Sudan, and dozens of different tribes, of which you have a couple of primary tribes. You're literally trying to create a civil society. Not that it didn't have that aspect, but in the way we think of a nation, it's nation building. So where's that assistance coming from? And what are some of the issues that these tribes have to deal with to make it even possible? There's no infrastructure. I guess there's one road literally in the entire country. They have oil. That's probably their only export. You were describing this earlier. So what did you see and observe that you can help explain to Missoulians in terms of what has to be done there?
Sure. In my opinion, it's really, you need some level of infrastructure. We hit on it earlier. The people and their wishes and their sort of motivations and what they want out of life aren't all that different from anyone in the West or anyone in the world. The issue is that there is no infrastructure. And the problem is since it's the sort of South Sudan and Sudan in general has such a chaotic history and so much instability over so many years that you have these tribal divides that have been going on forever, and you have this sort of identity crisis of people in the South Sudan. And so because of all of that, it's hard to establish any level of infrastructure because at every turn, somebody is looking for an opportunity to leverage these tribal divides, the instability over so many years, these bad feelings for power. And so you just have a lot of people trying to exploit different groups of individuals.
As I hear you to say that, I know that various countries throughout history have had people like the Simone Bolivars, the Nelson Mandelas, who have been able to take a vastly different group of people and bring them together and find things in common and be able to create a culture that could actually have infrastructure. Do you ever see that happening in Sudan?
John Garang was a really influential figure, and his helicopter crashed and he died years ago. But he was a really influential figure in moving South Sudan in a positive direction. In terms of right now, Bob, you had mentioned earlier in terms of what the situation is on the ground right now, and what you have are a lot of political figures trying to, again, manipulate these people based on these long-lasting divides. And so what it does take, to your point, is it takes somebody to use this as an opportunity to bring people together instead of further divide them. But in terms of the Nelson Mandelas of the world and those types of things, I think that is a little bit of luck of the draw. You just need to have somebody step up at the right time, and
but it has to be somebody from that
somebody
culture.
from that culture, somebody that understands it, somebody that people can believe in and believe that they are the person to sort of take them to the next stage.
So do you feel like if things are the way they are now, is Ajak and the other guys, is their mission kind of just a Sisyphean, hopeless cause without some major political leader having this big movement, or is there actually going to be progress from this small little group?
Sure. I'm hopeful in that regard. I think that what we experienced in South Sudan, there was just a general sort of change in the way that a younger generation sort of thought about South Sudan. So not just Ajak, not just Francis, but a lot of other folks that we met, sort of a lot of the staff at the various clinics, where they not only from, bring the tribes together, see themselves as Sudanese before they see themselves as Dinka or Nuer or Murle, not only from that perspective, but I talked to people who said, I'm not going to sell my daughter. Currently, you sell your daughter into marriage, and you pay or you receive cattle for your daughter.
Now, you say sell. Is this like a dowry system, or is it?
It's
something
a dowry
different?
system.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, and so that's another sort of culture, customary thing. And so, but so many of the people that we talked to wanted to change that, said, I'm never going to sell my daughter. I don't see it that way. My daughter's a person. She should find someone that she loves, she wants to be with, and that's sort of the way that the decisions that she'll make in her own life. And
but are those our views in terms of kind of Western civilization and how we see freedom, individuality? It's hard for us to kind of transition from what you just said to a world that is so radically different by culture, by history. Even if they form a semblance of a government, it will be decades, if ever, before the tribal issues meld to a point where you're not looking at me and vice versa based on the tribe.
Absolutely. Well, take a look at America. If our government didn't exist, think of how radically different parts of the country think about a lot of issues.
Oh, yeah.
Whether you're, Northeast, Southwest, you're in a major city like New York or LA, or if you're, in Texas, a rural, community in Texas. People think dramatically different. And if there wasn't a sort of unifying body that sort of made them to some degree cooperate, that, imagine what sort of world we would live in. So, and we could barely get things done now, even though, we have a system firmly in place. And so, to your point, it is going to be a process for sure. And they are at the very early stages of it. But I am hopeful, as we touched on earlier, that I believe the change comes from within. I don't think that it ever can come from a third party. And so I am hopeful that the sort of younger generation, the new generation of South Sudanese see things a little bit differently, and hopefully sort of strength in numbers will.
I'm going to ask a question before we'll go take a break. And would it be ruinous for a country like the United States or some other, large, well-organized country to come in and try to impose, through a sense of power or whatever, that you guys are killing each other, we're going to come in and we're going to fix this for you? Mm-hmm. I want you to tell me from your experience in there if that would work or not. So we're going to come right back, talk about that in a moment. All right, we're back on Talkback. 721-1290 is the number. John King is right over there. I'm Peter Christian. Bob Seidenschwartz in studio with us, along with John Michael Shink, co-producer, co-director of We Are the Ones. And I asked her a question just before the break. So go ahead.
Can you refresh my memory?
He wanted to challenge you on, you had said before that it couldn't be imposed from the outside. It had to be something domestic. And Peter brought up the case. What about the idea of a foreign country or foreign entity, be that the U.S. or the UN, coming in and imposing some sort of system of security and democracy, or whatever that might look like? I don't know.
nation building, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. But you can look at Iraq. You can look at Afghanistan.
You can look at Germany.
Look
you
at
can
Germany.
Look at Japan. South Korea.
There are a number of examples, and there's obviously we were talking about Iraq and things. They're still very hotly debated in America, but I just don't think that the track record says that works. I think that in any case, for real change to happen, not sort of a Band-Aid, but for a cultural shift, it has to come from within. And it goes to your point earlier, Bob, where so when that happens, it means that we are not instilling our values straight to another, community. What's happening is they will sort of come up with their own belief system, and that's going to probably have some elements of what we have in the West and some elements of what they sort of have had for years and years and years. And it's going to be sort of a hybrid system. But hopefully, again, if sort of those actions are based on the idea that they don't want conflict, that they want peace, and they want to sort of unify, that is just in general moving in a positive direction. I don't think it's really our place to sort of nitpick or impose or think that a certain system has to work.
And it's going to come in fits and starts.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
well, aren't you basically saying that tribal conflict is bad? Are you not imposing that value upon them? I mean, where does that? Where do you draw the line? Where do you stop saying you should do this stuff?
Well, I am not saying that's a good point, and I would say that I'm not saying that tribalism is bad. I was told.
Why not say?
No. Okay. Not that I have a problem saying. I hear where you're going, but what I'm saying is that being there, the people in South Sudan believe that tribalism is bad because they are the ones that are experiencing sort of death and destruction on a day-to-day basis. And so, of course, you could sit back and say, killing people continuously and creating this instability is bad. I mean, that's sort of objective.
But to your point, it has to finally come internally for them to go, hey, this isn't working.
Exactly.
We don't have any kind of an economy. Our children aren't getting educated. This is ongoing. They'll come to that conclusion about that aspect of tribalism in terms of the negatives. What I could see happening is, though, outside technology and resources will come in that are needed to form some semblance of a functioning economy. That's when we impose values and requirements. If I'm going to loan you money, then I need you to start doing this. If I'm going to build these roads, what do I get in return? That's where the game is complicated now, but gets really complicated because it's inevitable.
Exactly.
Because they need the expertise.
Give you a short story. So Partners in Compassionate Care is a nonprofit in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and they are an organization that that funds one of the clinics that we were in Warcock, in the Dinka village of Warcock. And when they started this, when they built the clinic, when they funded it, it was all with the idea that eventually it was going to be a self-sustaining clinic, that the Western hand was not going to be sort of on the shoulder of this organization for as long as it exists. Eventually, it was going to be able to exist on its own. And that's a little bit of the deal that you're talking about. It's like, well, we'll help you get started. We'll build that sort of infrastructure in the clinic, at least. We'll provide the equipment. We'll provide the materials. We'll pay the doctors. But eventually, you have to take the steering wheel and sort of drive this on your own. And just spoke to those guys at Partners in Compassionate Care about 2 months ago, and they said that they're right on the verge right now of being able to hand over the keys to the car. And so that's a small example of it working. And I think, again, that's sort of a reason to have hope that with the right sort of level of assistance, that there are people there that are willing to take that and run with it.
John Michael Shink joining us in Maryland. I want to give you plenty of time. I know you have a few things you wanted to bring up, so we're going to give you plenty of time to do that. We'll take a quick break. We also have 2 lines open. If you have a question for John Michael Shink, co-producer, co-director of a film, it's being just debuted last night at the Documentary Film Festival here in Missoula, called We Are the Ones. We'll be right back. Wow, where'd that come from? 721-1290 is the number, 1-800-568-5309. Montana World Affairs Council on the radio with Bob Seidenschwartz with us. John Michael Shink joining us in studio, co-producer, co-director of a documentary entitled We Are the Ones. Now, Marilyn, thank you for holding. You're on. Go ahead.
Good morning. This is fascinating. My heart has just broke for the third world countries for years, and so, up front, I would like your guest to tell us why you didn't go into the North. That wasn't, okay, you're in the South. I know why, but tell us why.
Sure. Marilyn, thanks for your call. Thanks for the question.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
So, in truth, the reason, I mean, there are a lot of potential reasons why you wouldn't go into North and South, but the reason we didn't is strictly story-based. We sort of stumbled into this story. We never went in to have that sort of dissertation on South Sudan. I should mention, too, that the way that we intended to tell the story, we never filmed any on-camera interviews. So the movie is told sort of in a verite style and sort of like with the visual vocabulary of a narrative film. So
real quick, for those non-filmmakers among us, verite style is like Latin for truth, but what does the style mean?
It's sort of fly on the wall kind of thing, where it's you don't break the fourth wall. You don't have an interview basically talking directly to the audience.
So it's just live footage, basically.
Sort of live footage, but we wanted to but take it a step further and make it feel visually have the same sort of production value of sort of a feature narrative film. But because of that, we knew, because of the style that we chose, we knew that we wouldn't be able to deal with all of the issues that has plagued South Sudan for years. We had to make this a personal story about people and about their experience. And so the reason we didn't go to the North is because, in truth, none of our surgeons went to the North. I mean, that's literally the reason.
Because you were telling the story of the surgeons.
We were telling the story of the surgeons.
Okay.
And so it wasn't so much a story about South Sudan or North Sudan or Sudan in general. It was a story about these surgeons, and through them, our hope was the audience would get a really clear picture of what it's like to be boots on the ground.
So follow up, do you know why they didn't go to the North?
Well, in terms of, again, there are a lot of different reasons why that might not happen with our guys. It's frankly that Glenn has just worked with those guys in the South more often. He had relationships with the clinics, both in Werkhoek and Olfangok.
I think the answer Marilyn is getting to is the North is Muslim.
Sure.
There is a conflict between the Muslim North and the Christian South in the Sudan. It probably would not have worked very well for these doctors to be going to the Muslim North as non-Muslims, possibly. And that's just another story. What you're saying is very clearly focused on the surgeons. That's a political story. That's a social story, if you want to go there.
That's an excellent point. And yes, that's absolutely true. I will say, though, that had they, in the film, for instance, talking about the sort of danger of crossing those sort of barriers, in the film, the doctors go to, a Dinka doctor goes to the Murle tribe after the Murle have been attacking the Dinka community, and uses medicine as sort of a bridge for peace and offers to help them sort of reestablish their clinic that had been bombed during the Civil War, no longer exists, and is one of the reasons why there's instability in that region. And so the idea that they would sort of walk into dangerous territory, I wouldn't have been surprised if the story would have taken us to the North. Now, it would have opened up a whole other can of worms, and it would have certainly potentially been dangerous, and there would have been a lot of things that would have had to been addressed. But in terms of, like, the core of the question of just why didn't we, it would have been sort of cross that bridge when you come to it. It wasn't in the plan, clearly, from the get-go because of those reasons, but the story just didn't take us there.
Okay, Marilyn, go ahead.
Okay, Bob gave the answer that I was looking for. The Sudanese South was formed because the Christians fled there and started their own country to get away from the Muslims that were killing them and are killing them all over the world. And Christian ministries have taken wells and built churches and medicines, and you got the Mercy Ships and Voice of the Martyrs and all these groups that have been over there for years and years and years and years and years and years, trying to form the foundation of Christ and these beliefs that, no, you don't sell your daughter into slavery. And so, I don't know, I guess I just wanted to take this, here in our country, coming back to our country, we're seeing, because we've taken God out of our country, we're hearing more talk of our tribes here. Tribes. I keep hearing that word tribes here now. And look at how we've sold our children, through abortion. I mean, we're doing what they are doing. Oh, but 21st century is the way you do it here. And I just hope that the message, I mean, I think it is going to take a lot of time over there, but hopefully, I just wondered how long the North was going to take also to come down into the South and totally destroy what they've tried to set up there.
Okay, well, let's let him answer that. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for the call. So, any thoughts on what Marilyn has said?
Sure. I mean, a lot of what Marilyn said is absolutely true. I mean, there is that division there, and it's based on a lot of different things, political, religious, and so forth. And the conflict between North and South has been well documented. It's been, obviously, main reason for civil wars for decades and decades and decades. So it's a huge issue. But again, sort of what I would add on to that in terms of, because sort of towards the end there, I think we were getting towards the idea of how long is it going to take before this sort of fractures, and I think that it's sort of already fracturing to a degree, and even in the South, we have that other layer of conflict.
Real quick question, the example you gave, the Dinka and the Merle tribe, I believe that's the right names, were they both Christian tribes? And I guess my question is, did you find religion bringing the tribes together in any way, or was it merely a dividing force?
In our experience, I don't think religion played a big role. I mean, in my experience, again, just speaking from my point of view, religion was a huge thing between the North and the South, clearly. But within the South, really the conflict stemmed from a lack of resources. Even if there are similar churches here and here and here, it's really just we don't have any water, we don't have any health care, we don't have any roads, we don't have any cattle. Our children are dying, and so our cattle are dying, and so frankly, we need to find a way to get these resources. And if that means take them from you, that's what I'm going to do.
We're going to come right back, and we have about 7 minutes left in the program. And I specifically asked John Michael a question toward the beginning of the program. I want to know how this has changed you, because obviously you're a different human being than you were when you went. And so I want to find out how that affected you. Get your personal story after this 1 minute timeout. Hey, we're back on Talkback, and don't have a whole lot of time left, but John Michael Shink, co-producer, co-director of We Are the Ones, just debuted in Missoula. The Missoula debut was last night. And tell me how this experience of going to South Sudan, following these surgeons, how it has changed you. Obviously, you're a young guy, but you're obviously a different human being. Everybody I've ever known that has gone on a medical mission or some sort of mission has come back different.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. I mean, for me personally, it is. When you come back, you really just the process going in and out of Sudan is an interesting one, because when you fly from D.C., where I live, to Sudan, you go from D.C. to Amsterdam to Nairobi to Lokochogio, which is on the border of Kenya and Sudan, and then you fly into Sudan. And so it's this staged process that slowly gets you acclimated to where you're going to end up. Because if you were to go straight from D.C. and you somehow could fly directly into Sudan, it would be like a slap in the face, sort of a major shock. Because you go from D.C. to Amsterdam to Nairobi, and then from when you go to Nairobi to Lokochogio is a small sort of base camp kind of deal. And when you fly in, it's like one little shanty and this sort of pseudo runway, and you get there and you're like, okay, this is a third world airport. Then you fly into Sudan, there is no runway. They have to buzz the ground once just to get the cattle away and the goats, and then they circle back and they land you in a field, and then you're like, okay, this is a third world airport. And so the process in and out is a stepped one, and that was good in a way to get you acclimated. In terms of coming back, what was the big thing? For me, I'd gotten sick at one point. Keep in mind, it's 110-degree weather. I had 103-degree fever. They thought I had malaria. Fortunately, I did not, but they treated me for it anyway because they didn't have the malaria test to tell whether or not I had malaria. Talk about a lack of resources. So they treated me like the old school with a big horse needle for 7 days. So I was pretty sick and lost some weight and all that. And then, and so you have 103-degree temperature. You can't, there's no ice, there's no air conditioning, there's no nothing. And so when I came back, it was what they called Snowmageddon in Washington, D.C. So we went from 110 degrees to 2 feet of snow. And the first thing that I had to do when I got off the plane was dig our sound guy's truck out of 3 feet of snow so that he could drive back to Richmond, Virginia. And so I mean, that was kind of nice because it takes you to the opposite end of the spectrum. But, you know, I remember I just wanted, when we were about a month out from leaving, we were talking to a guy named Steven who had worked in Kenya and been a nurse, and he was volunteering in Sudan. He's from Ohio. And he was talking about his experience in Kenya and talking about these great milkshakes that when you come out, I don't even like milkshakes, but like the idea to have one was just incredible because they don't exist. Like I said, you know, you might as well, you're just as likely to find a spaceship in South Sudan as you are a milkshake. So there are things that, and so those are some sort of the small things, but just in general, leaving, you have this incredible sort of, I guess, like gratitude for what we have day in and day out. I mean, it is tremendously different. You know, you might as well be on the moon when you're in a third world country because we have, the way of life is so different, the resources are so different, we have so many things that we really should be extremely, you know, excited and proud to have. And we fight a lot in this country about a lot of things, and I do believe that regardless of where you are in the world or what country you're in, you always want to progress and you always want to make it better for your citizens. So I'm not somebody that says like, well, we've got it great and compared to a third world country, but there is this sense of, you know, it's really not so bad.
So aside from the rocket-propelled grenades the sheep launched at you and the sniper fire from the cattle,
yes.
Did you have any encounters with violence in your time there? Because that's something that just hasn't really come up, I noticed.
So a couple of times, actually. So the violence really sort of got close to the clinics. In one scenario, a woman had been attacked and stabbed 16 times and brought into the clinic. And we followed as the surgeons sort of treated her throughout the day, and eventually, unfortunately, she passed away. And that was a situation where it really got close to the clinic. In another case, when we were in Old Fangok in the Nuer tribe, when we had gone back and forth between these clinics throughout the 3 months and sort of revisited them. And when we came back to Old Fangok, there was a point when everybody in the village, and the village isn't very big, it's like a small town at best, and everybody had an AK-47 on their shoulder. There had to be 160 AK-47s in the size of a 3-block radius. And so I didn't necessarily think that they were going to try to shoot me on purpose, but I thought that they might shoot me accidentally because nobody really can aim, and nobody can really use the weapon the way that it's intended to be used. So everybody's drinking. They got it on their shoulder. They got it on their leg. And during that time, 2 guys from different tribes started drinking. One guy shot and killed the other guy, and this was 20 yards away from us in the village. We heard the ricochet of the bullets in the village against the sort of the shanties, and the clinic staff sort of rushed us to a speedboat, took us to the other side of the river where we had to stay for about 8 hours because they knew that the tribe was going to come back for sort of retribution and try to something was going to happen. And so we were there during a lot of these instances, and a lot of them actually are in the film. There's no shortage of guns in the film, unfortunately.
And we have 1 minute left. I'm so sorry. But if you could tell us a little bit about the festival itself, where it's being held, and is it over now? Or
Sure. So the Big Sky Documentary Film Festival, right. It's great, a great festival, recognized all over the country as one of the best places to screen your doc. And it goes on, I believe, to the 16th. It started on Friday, premiered with HBO Films, Going Clear, the film about Scientology. It premiered Friday to a packed house. So that was great. And been here since then. I will be here for the better part of this week. Head out on Friday to Toronto, where we have another screening with the Toronto Black Film Festival and Hot Docs.
Wow. So. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it, and best of luck to you. And
thank you.
Anytime you're in Missoula, drop by, man.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been fantastic, and Missoula is beautiful, and I'd love to come back.
Glad you like it. What's coming up tomorrow, John?
We'll be speaking with Tim Orr and Boone Cole, who both are involved with the CSKT Water Rights Compact, but don't like it.